Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 149 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I'm your host, 𝐥𝐞𝐦𝐿. Thanks for joining me again. So, today on the show, we got a ton of stuff to go through. I'm always amazed at that. You know, Parliament isn't sitting, the Senate isn't sitting, but yet there's always firearm-related news, oddly enough. So we still have a purpose to exist here on the internet, at least for now. So today on the show, we're going to give you a quick little Bill C-21 update. I mean, there's not much there. But the CCFR is taking action against the government yet again. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Tracy and I attended the Conservative Party of Canada Policy Convention in Quebec City. We also attended TACCOM in Mississauga, Ontario. And unfortunately, the mainstream media never takes a day off in defaming gun owners or spreading disinformation about them or firearms in general in Canada. All that and more when we come back. But let's talk really quick about some of the businesses that are supporting this podcast and how much we truly appreciate it. Bullseye North stocks a wide variety of guns, ammo, optics, knives, and accessories from all the big brands and offers free shipping nationwide on orders over $200. Some conditions apply. Sign up for their weekly newsletter to get zeroed in on their weekly deals and live inventory. Bullseye North is your sports shooting superstore. A huge thank you goes out to our great friends over at the Saskatchewan Rivers chapter of Safari Club International. They do a lot of great work over there, including supporting the CCFR and the CCFR Radio Podcast. Check out all their great work at saskriverssci.com. That's saskriverssci.com. CTOMS has been a provider of trauma care training to military and police in Canada for nearly 2 decades. Now this emergency medical training is being made available to a wider audience through CTOMS Academy online courses. This online training is valuable to anyone that pursues sporting or outdoor activities or finds value in being prepared for a crisis. Visit ctomsacademy.skillbuilder.co and use promo code CCFR30 for a 30% discount on all training. And thank you so much to our great friends over at Vortex Canada. They continue to support the CCFR podcast and the CCFR. Can't say enough about them. Check out all their great products at vortexcanada.net. That's vortexcanada.net. Vortex, the force of optics. All right, we are back. So I've got a couple of housekeeping items I want to go over with you before we move on. And these are a couple of donations that came in. I don't see all the donations that come into the CCFR because it's handled by others at the organization. I just don't see them. But these ones I did see. So I want to make mention of them because I can't tell you how much I really appreciate the help. Okay, it's really, really important to me. So anyway, these ones came in over TACCOM. That's why I saw them. So Scorpion Outdoors at their booth at TACCOM ran a fundraiser and they donated $2,000 to the CCFR. So thank you so much, guys. Jeff Reese from Calgary Shooting Center came by and handed the CCFR a $3,500 check from a fundraiser that they ran over at their shop during Beretta Days. So thank you, Calgary Shooting Center, for that help as well. And our friends over at International Shooting Supplies in Surrey, British Columbia donated $1,000 from a fundraiser that they ran. So anyway, when I see them, I just want to make sure that people know how much we appreciate the help. So thank you, guys. Next thing, the CCFR is filing an injunction. I think by the time you're watching this, we've already filed an injunction against the federal government concerning the amnesty regarding the 2020 gun ban. I just want to explain really quick why we do these things. We're not resuing the government or it's, whatever, right? Basically, in 2020, the Liberal government saw this unthinkable tragedy that befell our fellow citizens in Nova Scotia. They're like, hey, we can make some political hay here. We know that this guy never got any of these guns in Canada, that Canadian regulation or gun bans would have done nothing to change anything. He smuggled all of the firearms that he used in from the United States, but this is a great opportunity to hammer over the head all the people that aren't going to, or that are likely unlikely to vote for us anyway, and please some of the crazier people in our base, right? That people that don't know anything about this topic, but are just like, government force on people I don't like, sounds great, I'm for it, right? So they roll out this gun ban, and they're like, well, this is going to be really great for us politically. and we're going to try to do a little mitigation action and tell gun owners, hey, don't get mad at us. This is about public safety, and we're going to pay you for these guns. You can't use them. You can't transfer them. Nobody can inherit them. They're basically just thousands or tens of thousands of dollars just sitting there. You can't, like the biggest thing for me is like, you can't even go to the range with them. It's 3.5 years now. But when you think back then, anybody that understands what's required to do a gun buyback at that scale, we're laughing. They're like, are you crazy? What do you mean you're going to do this at the first earliest opportunity? Like, you're not going to, this is going to be years before you even get anywhere near doing this. Canada's not New Zealand, but it's 10 million square kilometers. And the overwhelming majority of those firearms are not registered. They're non-restricted firearms for a good reason, as we see as well, by the way. But this is crazy. When do you think this is ever going to happen? And I can't use my gun. I haven't done anything. I can't use my gun until you decide they're going to roll out this buyback. Like, that's insane. It doesn't make sense to anybody that's not stupid. And I normally, as you guys know, I try to temper how I say things, but I mean, that's just it. Anyone that's not stupid would think this is a stupid idea. So anyway, they put in this amnesty. You know, that was another part of their political mitigation strategy, you know, for gun owners. Oh, don't worry. We're not going to, you're not going to be a criminal, a gun trafficker overnight in unauthorized possession of a now prohibited firearm. Don't worry, we got you covered. There's an amnesty for whatever it was, 18 months. Can't really remember what that was. But then as the deadline was approaching, they weren't renewing it, right? They had no gun buyback and they weren't renewing the amnesty. So now people like us, we know that the government is going to extend the amnesty because they don't want to be destroyed by people for doing something as even worse than what they did in the first place, which is make criminals out of the people that still haven't done anything wrong. They would renew it, but something that the government likes to do is they like to leave it right to the last minute. It doesn't worry people like me because I'm in tune with what's going on politically, and I know they would have to do it. But it worries people that don't deal with this stuff all the time. And if you can imagine how scared some people are, how do I know this? People contact the CCFR either through email or they actually call the line, the 1-800 number, and they're like, okay, the amnesty's coming up. I have an AR-15. What am I supposed to do? What should I do? And it's like, well, don't worry, they're going to extend it. So there are people out there that are worried about this. And this is how the government makes you feel small. They know this. You think that I know this and they don't? Of course they know people get worried and it's stress and it's weighing on them with everything else that's going on in their lives. But they kind of like that, right? It's like it's their message, I think. And I don't want to overplay this, right? But it's like their message, like, just so you know, we can do basically whatever we want to you, right? And they demonstrate that quite often in many different ways. But it's like we couldn't care less whether someone is under extreme stress because they think they're going to be a criminal overnight or they have to turn that gun in for no compensation because the gun buyback hasn't happened. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's what's going on. So last time when it was expiring, they were waiting and waiting and waiting. We're like, do we have to file an injunction to get them to extend the amnesty? So we did anyway in an abundance of caution. And if you remember, like, it was getting down there. It was the last couple of weeks or a week or something like that. And 4 days after, something like that. It was in a podcast. You guys can check that. But just from memory, I think it was like 4 or 5 days later, maybe less, than when we filed the injunction, they extended the amnesty. They needed us to kick them in the butt to do it so they wouldn't give gun owners a nervous breakdown, right? Crazy stuff. So here we are again, same situation. And we're filing an injunction again because the deadline is coming. We don't want them to wait till the last minute and freak people out. So anyway, we've gone ahead and done that on your behalf. So we couldn't do it unless we had help like the stuff that I just mentioned. All right, onwards and upwards. As we're going to go through with Tracy, I'm not going to really talk about much more, but we're going to go through all this stuff with Tracy. Tracy and I attended the Conservative Party of Canada Policy Convention in Quebec City. And it was pretty neat, apparently, and I can't verify this, so I didn't fact check. I kind of looked around a little bit on the internet, but you can fact check this and correct me if I'm wrong. But it's my understanding that this was the biggest, like the most well-attended policy convention in the history of the party. And the Conservative Party have raised more money in the last year than any political party in Canadian history. That's my understanding. Now, if that's true, that's really something. And that's another reason on top of all the other reasons that we're going to get into when Tracy comes on about why you should be optimistic. I think we talked about this quite a bit in the last podcast, but I just want to make sure that you guys are keeping your chins up. You're keeping your spirits up. Like, we will outlast these people. Okay. We're going to make it. So worst case scenario, we got 26 months before an election. The government could fall at any time and there could be an election. And as you know, the Conservatives are actually looking at supermajority levels of seat projections right now, like up in the 190s, according to some polls. And that is fantastic. Okay. So great news. If nothing terrible goes wrong, turns out that Pierre Poilievre is a werewolf or something we didn't know, a lot of this stuff is gonna get rolled back and things are just gonna get normal again. Canada will be safer because they'll pound the criminals and the smugglers. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And they'll start working on the economy and maybe we can get back to realizing the Canadian dream again, right? Not for me, us old guys, we're gonna be fine, right? It's gonna be for Gen Zs and for millennials. They're having their dream robbed from them. So, everybody's hurting because of this 8 years of the Liberals. So there's a lot of good reasons to be enthusiastic, to be optimistic. I just want to make sure that never leaves your mind. Enjoy your life. It's a gift. So we just got a couple of things we need to clean up. Anyway, I'm going to bring Tracy on in 1 second. There would be no episode complete without a crazy Poilievre 𝐿𝐴 tweet, but I'm going to save it to the outro, okay? So I'm going to save it to the end of the show. I don't know what's going on over their feed. They go off the rails sometimes and it gets really crazy. And I had a whole bunch of their tweets. I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to give them this much airtime. Everyone knows that the stuff that comes out of them, whoever's teenager is running their Twitter account is, either they're day drinking and tweeting or something's going on there. Something's really wrong. But anyway, a crazy Poly tweet coming up at the end. All right, enough of my babbling. Let's bring Tracy on. All right, via Skype, we've got Tracy Wilson from the CCFR. Wilson!
I've heard that a few times in the last couple of days.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a lot of stuff to cover. I think I said something in the intro about that. It's just, and oddly enough, it's like you'd think it would be just coming out of summer and Parliament's not sitting, and then we'd have nothing to talk about. We keep thinking that we would have nothing to talk about, and then we have these action-packed episodes. So,
yeah, there's so much going on.
Yeah, all right. So let's get started. So the first thing we want to talk about is, let's get this over with in like a minute. But Parliament is sitting when, and the Senate is sitting when, and what's the next step, really quick?
Yeah. So the House of Commons and the Senate will resume sitting on September 18th. The House will come back, and the following day on the 19th will be the Senate. Committees will be reconvened. Mandate letters will be issued by the PMO because, of course, we've had a cabinet shuffle, and maybe we'll see some movement on the creation of CFAC. We're still waiting for that. So a whole bunch of stuff is about to happen, and it all starts this week. All
right. So as far as our role at the Senate or the Senate hearings or whatever, those get scheduled when they come back. We don't have a schedule right now.
Yeah, that's right. So the committee has to sort of set their schedule, and meeting notices will go out. And yeah, so none of that will happen right away, but within the first couple of weeks for sure.
Okay, cool. Now let's move on to something interesting, which is you and I did a whirlwind tour. We went to the Conservative Party of Canada Policy Convention I guess that would have been last Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
A week ago last Wednesday.
Yep.
And then we were there for Thursday and Friday. Saturday morning, we flew to Mississauga for TACCOM for the rest of Saturday and Sunday. And then I flew home on Monday. So
yeah, it's been crazy.
We've got a lot to talk about there. So why don't we start with the Conservative Party of Canada Convention? Let's start with the best news that came out of that. We'll start at the top and work our way down.
Yeah, so the best news out of that, I know gun owners are always looking, to kind of reaffirm with Pierre Poilievre his support for licensed gun owners, sports shooters, and hunters. And, I think in the media there's a lot of play on the hunting aspect because it's very socially acceptable. But during his keynote address on the Friday night, Pierre Poilievre confirmed that it is his intention to repeal the gun bans. And that's exactly what he said. He's going to use the money that's wasted on banning guns from legal gun owners to go after criminals and gun smuggling. So, I don't know. That sounds like a crazy idea, I guess, but I'd support it.
Yeah, well, I think most clear-eyed, smart, reasonably reasonable person would support that as well. And actually, I think we have a story towards the end of our time together that just reinforces that. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But I think I am guilty of spreading some misinformation because I told a few people at the booth that Poilievre said he will repeal all the bans. And I watched it back. I'm like, he didn't say all. He said the bans, which I guess is implied like the bans that you've experienced over the last 8 years, I'm going to repeal them. And it's actually quite a smart policy. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be an extremist view or, radical to say that you want to reduce crime, violence, and gun smuggling by focusing on the people doing it, right? I don't know why that's so radical.
You're an extremist, clearly.
Yes, clearly.
Yeah. And a whole bunch of other phobes and just generally a bad person for even suggesting that they deal with the actual problem. I don't even know if I can continue now. I'm outraged. Triggered. All right. Let's move on. So this is kind of some fun stuff. So there were 2 firearm-related policies that got debated and voted on. So why don't we just kind of just gloss over what those 2 policies were pretty quick, and then we can talk about the process, which actually was kind of the fun part. So anyway, talk about those 2 policies.
Yeah, so there was 2 firearm-related policies that were sort of, on the table at convention. The whole process from beginning to end, like I'm on my EDA, and there's hundreds and hundreds of policies that come forward, and there's this whole big weeding process and voting process that takes it down to, I think it was 36 or something that come forward to convention. So guns made 2 of those. One of them, I think it was well-intentioned, but the wording of it would have actually removed the long-standing conservative policy that was developed and adopted in 2014 to adopt the simplified classification system, which is an actual defined, very technical system of classifying firearms. So it would have removed that and just sort of left it open to a system that would be rather undefined. So we didn't really want to make that change. So luckily it was debated, voted on, and defeated. So that was good. And then the other one was the decriminalization of expired licenses. So let's say you're a gun owner, your license expires. You shouldn't necessarily be rushed off to a lengthy prison sentence because you didn't get your paperwork done in time. And this is especially important with the fact that there are backups at a lot of the CFO offices, right? I've been encouraging people to renew at least 6 months in advance, knowing you still have a 6-month grace period. That gives you 12 months to get that license renewed before you would be criminalized. And it's still not possible for everybody. So if the CFO isn't able to renew those licenses in a timely period, it stands to reason that gun owners shouldn't face criminal penalties for a paperwork crime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, those were the 2 policies. And I think the interesting thing...
That one passed, by the way.
Sorry?
That one passed, by the way.
Yeah. They both passed. So that's good. So the interesting thing that we got to experience, because I'd never actually been in one of those policy debates / whatever, where they decide what policies are going forward to the party to approve or not. I don't think you have either. I don't think you've ever been a delegate. But for me, it was actually a lot of fun because, and I'll describe this and you can add your comments, is we went into this quite big room. I mean, there's probably, 400 people in there. Yeah. And they had a dais where the moderator and a few other people were up there. They had some screens where they're showing the policy. And then they had 2 microphones. One microphone had the word yes on it, and the other microphone stand had the word no on there. And an MP comes up, and the sponsor of the bill, or maybe it's an EDA person, I don't know.
The policy.
Yeah. Or the policy. They describe what they're trying to do. I think they have 2 minutes. And then people line up at the no microphone and the yes microphone. They have 30 seconds each to make a comment of why the room should vote no or why the room should vote yes. And the moderator cuts them right off. So basically, don't come up to the mic unless you've got your your point figured out and you can express it in 30 seconds. Once three on each microphone get a yes or no argument for 30 seconds each, the sponsor gets a rebuttal for, I don't know, like 1 minute or something, and that's it. And everybody holds up their yes or no cards and it's decided. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. And I've been to the policy convention many times, but never as a delegate, usually as a member observer. So going as a delegate was interesting because I've never actually got the opportunity to speak to or vote on these issues. So yeah, it was pretty neat, very organized and disciplined. And I like it because I'm all about like just, getting stuff done and using concise, proper arguments. So yeah, I loved it. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I liked about it was fast, right?
Yeah.
It was really quick. And I think one of the other things that you and I both found really entertaining is we were there for a bunch of different policies, not just the firearm ones, because there's a whole bunch of, it was justice and, crime and whatever. This was this
social issues.
Yeah, this working group. And there were a couple policies that came up. And if you remember, right, the yes people, they were all right. They were all, they were all reasonable and right. And then the no people, they were right too.
Yeah. We said that because the people on either microphone, we'd listen to what they had to say and be like, yeah, that makes sense. That's true. And then listen to the other side and it's like, that also makes sense and is true. So it's interesting. It's a really neat way to sort of, that's how democracy should be, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really interesting. And I just thought it was some good conversation. People had great points and really well thought out positions. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was probably the most fun of any kind of session or whatever that we attended there. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too.
Now, this is worth mentioning. We didn't talk about this before, but of course, we come away from the convention, and then obviously all of these policies and whether they passed or failed or whether they were just suggested is running all over the mainstream media, which of course we know is hard, almost extremist left. And there's all this debate and like, oh my God, can you imagine that the conservatives have, had this conversation and it's like, you got to be reminded that, and the mainstream media doesn't do a good job of this for their own self-serving reasons, in my opinion, but you got to be reminded, like, this isn't legislation. The Conservative Party aren't in government, and the cabinet, should the Conservative Party become form government, the cabinet doesn't have to implement any of these things. It's not legislation.
No, that's the thing. These are non-binding policies. And that's the thing with the grassroots party is in the Conservative Party, ideas and thoughts are brought forward from the grassroots, from the members, and they kind of make their way up through the ranks. And of course, I would assume that leaders would consider these issues and these policies and these stances in the way they govern because, at the end of the day, they are responsible to the party. But there's no obligation to say, oh, okay, my party voted on this policy. Well, that's it. We're going to implement legislation once we form government. It's totally non-binding, but it does sort of gauge the climate in your party and your supporters so that you know where they stand. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah. I mean, at least it's a situation where you're allowed to have a discussion about things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At very minimum.
Well, that's the thing. There's issues that, I see on Twitter. And I mean, just as a normal human being, I may have an opinion on them, but I'm like, ooh, I don't feel comfortable wading into it because I'm just going to be bombarded from every angle, right? So I just, keep scrolling on by. But it was interesting to be able to hear conservatives sort of speak about things that they're traditionally beaten up for, sort of in this environment where it was like, yeah, let's have some healthy discussion and debate, consider both sides of an issue. And then at the end of the day, let democracy take its course. So I loved it.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So then, but wait, the fun's not over. There's more fun to talk about. While we were there was a demonstration that like when we first showed up, there was a demonstration outside the convention, and it was described as, I'm going to show some footage that I took with my phone, but this was described by liberal Marcy Ian and some other mainstream media types as 40 feminist organizations demonstrating outside the CPC convention. This is what 40 feminist organizations looks like, guys. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, and you know, you wonder, and the mainstream media wonders why they get called fake news. You know, it's just like you're literally spreading fake news. There wasn't 40 people there. There's about 17
No, there was
people
not
there.
40 people.
So are they?
Well, and here's the thing. We jumped out of our Uber and I was like, oh, look, a demonstration. You know, we see them, once in a while outside Toronto Sportsman Show and whatever. So I'm interested. I'm a political person. I want to know what they're demonstrating about. And I run over and it's like one lady's got a climate change sign and another one's got one about the patriarchy and, you know, hating men. And another one was about abortion, another one about colonialism. And I was like, I don't even know. I don't think they know what they're protesting about. So, you know, we took film for a couple seconds and went in. I came back out about, I don't know, 12 minutes later and they were already gone. So it was obviously orchestrated. Okay, everyone, let's show up here at this time, demonstrate for 10 minutes, with our various signs and then get out of here. And then magically, of course, there's a mainstream media news article all about it being tweeted by the Liberal Minister of Women. It's like, no, that wasn't totally planned out.
Oh, yeah. It's like
they think we're stupid.
Yeah, literal propaganda.
Yeah,
Like,
literal
like
propaganda.
literally fake propaganda. So it's amazing. Amazing this stuff goes on, and it's amazing that people, they get away with all of it, right? Because there's so many people, reading the Journal du Montreal or whatever it's called, and they're like, oh my God, 40 organizations put together a huge, I mean, this must have been a massive demonstration in front of the you know what I mean? And they're like, oh, and
it was like 18 women really angry with signs and various topics.
I know, it's so funny because they're yelling and screaming and chanting for whatever it was, 15 minutes. And I mean, I'm glad that I'm not playing the audio of the footage that I did because I'm just laughing. Because I'm like, what is this? Like, and there's a reason why you can't walk up to any of these people and just say, so tell me what it is you're protesting and what is it?
Oh, are you crazy?
What is it that you want? Right?
No. They don't know what they want. That's the whole problem. So you'd just be wasting your time and you as a male, well, you wouldn't be welcome in that circle anyways.
Can you imagine, right? And and it's funny.
We're better just to film for a couple seconds and go in and have real conversations with Canadians interested in making a difference. So
yeah, and Bill Blair calls us extremists, right?
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
Lunatic. Anyway.
They weren't the only crashers of the CPC convention.
That's right. Tell us about it.
Yes. So there was a couple different Liberal ministers who, I think Minister Stephen Guilbeault flew all the way from Beijing back to Canada just in time to, we knew he was coming because there was limos and all kinds of security agents and all kinds of stuff. So huge carbon footprint on this trip. But he came to the policy convention and held a press conference outside, basically just to complain that he doesn't like Pierre Poilievre's plan. The Conservatives' plan sucks. Everyone should pay more carbon tax. And then he left. Like there was no real point to it other than just trying to get himself some airtime with the media, which played out perfectly because there was a whole swarm of paparazzi, right?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important points of that is, what was he doing in Quebec City? Does he live there? No. He flew in, and his security detail, they set all that stuff up, all at taxpayers' expense.
Yeah.
Literally a little stunt, right?
It was a stunt. It was.
Yeah,
and they were just trolling conservatives.
Yeah, and in fact, you and I were standing just a little ways behind Guilbeault when he was doing his thing. We didn't get on camera, unfortunately, we didn't get
I know.
We didn't get to photobomb him.
To make us move. But whatever.
Yeah, but it was funny because we were standing back there speculating whether or not his people would come and ask us to move. And I was like, well, they can ask. They're not going to like the response. Like, you're coming to the CPC to troll them while spending whatever 40 grand of taxpayer money, and we're in deficit. So that's a $40,000 loan that, my daughter at 25 is going to have to pay back with interest. You know what I mean? From her taxes.
Halfway across the world to come and preach to us about using less carbon when we put gas in our cars.
Yeah, these people are ridiculous. Well, speaking of ridiculous people, the that Shaggy guy, what's his Pablo Rodriguez?
Pablo, yeah,
AKA Shaggy. He showed up there to troll conservatives again at taxpayer expense as well.
I don't know. Like, It's funny to me because politics has kind of turned into this weird like Twitter trolling circus thing. But you'd think at least at an event like this, there's like, I don't know, 3,000 or 3,500 members there in attendance, members and MPs and party people. And everyone's inside, there's this rigid agenda, all these issues that got to be talked about and debated and, listen to some keynote speakers. And it wasn't entirely serious, but it was a fairly serious thing. And then you've got all these liberals like goofing off out front, with these publicity stunts and fake protests. And I don't know, it's just crazy. You don't see any of that at the Liberal cabinet retreat. They just had yet another retreat after their last retreat. And you don't see, conservative MPs flying in to try and make videos in front of their event, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, it's really wild. I mean, if you look at, you got 17 angry women chanting and ranting and raving for 15 minutes outside the CPC convention, and there's stories written how there's 40 feminist organizations that organize this huge rally, and then we put 5,000 people on Justin Trudeau's doorstep. The Canadian press comes out and says, "Oh, there's 800 people there, maybe," and doesn't seek comment from us and minimizes the whole thing. Is just under the rug. I mean, like, it's just, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, mainstream media. Like, yeah, you're getting branded with the term fake news for a legitimate and valid reason.
Yes.
Anyway,
this is the problem, and I remember when being a kid. I don't know if I was naive or if things have gone that far astray, but I remember being a kid and you could gather around the 6 o'clock news and watch what was going on. And it was just a trustworthy person, a reliable person delivering you information, not propaganda. Maybe it was, and we just didn't know. But I feel like things have really gone down the toilet as far as the media's ability to just convey information and put, facts in front of Canadians and let them decide for themselves. That's gone.
Yeah, it's wild. Who was the CBC guy that did the national? What was his name again?
Lloyd Robertson.
Was it? Or was he the CTV guy?
I don't know.
Anyway, it was, yeah. I think it was Lloyd Robertson. And, you used to trust him.
Yeah.
Like, explicitly, right? And
yeah.
And then you look at how, what he was like towards the end of his career. And then, because the mask was slipping off and you're like, was he always that way? Was CBC always that way? Or is this just the last, 15 years or so? It's
I don't
hard
know.
to tell. Were they belly laughing at us 25 years ago because we were so easy to fool? Or,
well, there's for sure laughing now because there's all kinds of people who are like, well, I saw it on the news, treating these people as reliable sources. And unfortunately, they're not anymore.
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny because they're not laughing anymore. Now you have your Rachel Gilmores that are running around just screaming that she's a victim of any possible thing, right? To try to grab a hold of even a shred of credibility. Like, you have to believe me because everyone else just hates me because I'm a woman, or, it's really something. Anyway, let's move on.
Speaking of journalists.
Speaking of fake news, we've got a Toronto business columnist that has decided he's going to declare via, I think it's Toronto Star, no?
Yeah, it was Toronto Star business column.
That he has indisputable evidence that guns need to be banned, and that's the reason there's firearm-related violence. So why don't you give us the rundown of that?
Yeah, so David Olive wrote an article for the Toronto Star. He's their business columnist, and they even put it in the business section. Basically, it's called Canada Gun Nation. And he basically equates the rising numbers over the last few years of legal imports of firearms to the rising crime and violence we're seeing in our streets, which is provides zero data for it, just as these two things must be related. Now, I mean, I think we all know exactly why imports have raised over the last couple of years, and that's when you've got a Trudeau Liberal government constantly threatening bans. This is going to be banned, that's going to be banned. The door is going to close on handgun ownership. We're going to freeze it on this date. What do people do? The obvious thing. Canadians have never owned more guns than they do now under this Liberal government, because he keeps threatening to stop us from having them, right? So people run out and get what they can while they can. So somehow this David Olive, in all his brilliant wisdom, decides that must be the reason for rising crime and violence in this country. It's got nothing to do with gangs running unabated. It's got nothing to do with repeat violent offenders getting out on bail. It's got nothing to do with C-75 or C-5 that lessened and softened sentences for some very serious violent gun crimes. It's got nothing to do with any of that. It must be because of you crazy gun owners.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just unbelievable.
Well, and you know, kind of the interesting story behind that story is, where did he get this idea in the first place? And where did he get any of the stats or quotes or data that he probably, I didn't read the article, to be honest.
I know where he got them. I'll tell you.
From Bloomberg.
He quotes the ATF report.
Yeah.
You know, the one we discussed in the last podcast that excluded, 99% of crime guns because they are already prohibited.
Yeah.
So they aren't sent to the ATF for tracing. So those are already excluded from that great big pie of crime guns. So he takes that information. He's like, oh, well, there you have it. He even says Canada's rate of shootings per capita has soared in tandem with the rise in firearm imports.
Yeah. Well, it's also soared in alongside a Trudeau Liberal government. So
that's right.
Whatever. But he got that. He got the idea, and he was led to the tracing report, presumably, like the rest of them, from the Bloomberg article. And I think this is a fantastic, perfect textbook reference case of how disinformation gets generated in the mainstream media. And then everyone they don't, like this guy didn't care to read any of this stuff. He didn't call anybody, it seems, and that's what it looks like to me. He didn't call anybody and be like, okay, does this relationship hold true? Why not? Yeah, I mean, this is how disinformation from the mainstream media goes from one to the other in an effort to influence the minds of people and have them believe something that actually isn't true.
Yeah, and this kind of, disinformation and misinformation isn't just, harmful to the debate or whatever. It's like there's deadly results. Like people are dying. People are being murdered in all kinds of ways. Gang crime is out of control. Violence is out of control. And here we still have these people, circling the drain on gun owners instead of encouraging the government to focus on real public safety measures. And the Liberal public safety record speaks for itself. And it's a deadly failure.
To use the words of the Doctors for Protection from Licensed Gun Owners, with devastating results. Like the results of their work, and people like this journalist and everyone else that fools Canadians into supporting the Liberals' platform on safety has resulted in devastating results, like literally
100%,
death.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yep.
Whatever, man. It is what it is. Okay, let's move on. We beat that to death, thank goodness.
Okay.
Well, it's so crazy, right? It's just hard to even come up with the words to describe it, right?
As a business columnist, he's absolutely an expert on criminology and firearm regulation.
Yeah, well, you can't swing a dead cat in this country without hitting an idiot. Okay, so
this is true.
TACCOM. We went to TACCOM, which was the second half of the CPC Policy Convention whirlwind trip.
Yep.
So tell us about the CCFR booth, and then I'm going to read the list of our volunteers.
Yeah, well, once again, we proved you can be in two places at the same time. We had the same experience last year with CPC leadership being on the same weekend as TACCOM. So we managed to hit both events, and we arrived on Saturday morning. The show had already started on Friday. So a huge thank you to our volunteers, and in particular, Greg Weiss, you're going to name them all, for getting there ahead of us, setting up, starting the work. Like, there's a lot involved. And normally, I'm there to kind of, guide them, I suppose, is what you would say. But usually I'm just barking orders. But usually we get this all done together. But they literally hauled the stuff to Toronto. You and I are in Quebec City. Hauled the stuff, got it set up, got the show started, just did an incredible job. I know the show was maybe a little smaller than years before, but I think it was an absolutely amazing opportunity to bring our community out despite everything that's happened over the last 8 years. We cannot let these people win. So, Yeah, I absolutely loved it. Fred and the gang at FOC just did an amazing job putting this event on. It is a ton of work, and I'm really grateful to all the exhibitors, the other exhibitors who came out from all across our industry and our community. And yeah, it was just an awesome time to really connect with our community.
Yeah, it was good. It was good, and it's nice to go to something like that once in a while and reconnect, right?
Yeah, it sure is.
So we had, I can't say enough about the people that volunteer for the CCFR. I mean, we've been talking about it endlessly, but I'm just going to read down the list of people that worked the booth at least at some point, and people came and went, but we had a booth full of volunteers the entire time, like full of them.
Yes.
At least, like at some points, at probably 10 people. So it was just unbelievable. So I'm going to run down the list real quick. Greg Clark, Greg Weiss, of course. I'll say something about him at the end. Doug Johnson, Jennifer Hodge, coming from Edmonton.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Brian Driscoll, George Maliaros. I think so. Sorry.
Yeah, he's a new field officer.
Yeah, sorry, George, if I screwed that up. Anna McIntosh, Baz Kanda, of course. Nick Soper, Terry Muxlow, Michael Dunn, Patrick Pether, Mike Heineck from Lloydminster, Alberta. Like, these people traveled at their own expense to work a booth
crazy.
for the CCFR. And if I'm missing anyone that did that as well, like, don't hold it against me. I just, because I don't know everything. And like, that's mind blowing, the level of commitment. And, you know, when I asked Jennifer, like, you traveled here, and she's like, yeah, I love it. It's a ton of fun. I get to hang with good people, and I was just like blown away. And then Adam R. for helping, Mark LaFond, of course, and Derek Yateman. So, and I'll say one more thing, add to something you said about Greg Weiss. Greg took 100% responsibility for that entire show. Brought a 25 foot trailer of his own, dragged it all the way from Ottawa, all the way to Mississauga, Ontario, and ran that whole show himself as a volunteer. And
yeah,
we couldn't have done it because we weren't around. But it was really
like
something.
we had to choose. Yeah. Maybe we weren't going to do TACCOM, or maybe we'd have to miss the convention. And Greg, it's because of Greg we were able to be in two places at once.
Yeah, really awesome. So thanks so much, everyone, for all your help. We couldn't do it without you. All right.
And, Greg also I think on the Thursday when they're doing setup at the convention center, like, it's a huge job, right? Tons of stuff going on. Not only did he have to set up the booth, but he also had to set up the CCFR stage, which was this monstrosity. It was absolutely beautiful. We had this huge 10-foot tall by 20-foot wide CCFR wall to adorn the stage. And it was truly an honor to sponsor the stage at TACCOM and, support that kind of, panels and speakers and all the things that go on the stage that people come to watch. Like, it was really important for us to be able to sponsor that. So
yeah,
it was a lot of work for them to put that stuff together, but it was great.
Well, I did a rambling chat, which was great, which was okay, I guess. And then you did a ladies panel, and
yeah, I did a ladies panel with like a couple of different women from totally different ends of our community. So it was just really cool.
Yeah, and then you did a kind of a fireside chat approach with Conservative MP Blaine Calkins.
Correct. Yeah.
And then another guest that was on the stage was Solomon Friedman, who gave a great talk on kind of what the I didn't get a chance to listen to it because we had just gotten there, so I was running around, and I think you were too.
Yeah.
But
I had a lengthy chat with him at the booth afterwards, though, and I know he spoke to the court challenge, and I think, I'm not trying to offend anybody else by saying this, but I would be pretty confident in saying he's absolutely one of Canada's top lawyers when it comes to, criminal defense and firearms law and all of those things. He's, there's a couple of really great ones, but he's definitely up there, and just a really solid guy. We had a wonderful conversation, and it was great to see him up there. There was some other stuff going on too. There was some sort of dogs up there, working dog stuff.
Some sort of dogs were on the stage.
Well, I saw the puppies, and of course, I was like, oh, puppies, but I don't think they're the type of puppies you go up and cuddle. But
no.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So it was really great. Okay.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Let's move on to clip of the week. We're doing this one together.
Okay.
So this clip comes from Chief Dale McFee, and I believe he's Edmonton Police. He was I think still is, a member of the Canadian Association for Chiefs of Police. He appeared in the video that I did with Talib, I think in the last episode, where it was like, he's like, all these chiefs are telling us at C21, we got to get this through, that more guns equal more death, less guns mean less people die. I'm like, what else do they say? And he's like, oh, I don't know. And then of course there's McFee and others saying, yeah, this isn't licensed gun owners. It said basically nothing to do with them. So anyway, hilarious. Let's have a look at the clip and we'll comment on it in a second.
About bail and enforcement of bail, we know there have been recent tragedies where the accused was out and was going against their bail conditions. We know the case with the Chinatown homicide is being reviewed, where he was dropped in our city against bail conditions, and more recently, the father of 7 killed by a man who was near a transit station against bail conditions. So I'm wondering what needs to be done to enforce the bail conditions that do exist.
The reality is the level of violence, the people that you're talking about, having looked at that, never should have been out on bail. So it stops there. You can take that one, you can take the young girl, or the young child and her mother at the school. I could probably name 10 of them off the top of my head. You can take the 26 homicides, all with extreme violent records that we've had in the last 2 years. The people that you're talking about never should have been out on bail, never should have been out on bail.
So this clip itself doesn't have anything to do specifically with gun control, but it's the other side of the equation, right? It's the if it's not licensed gun owners that are causing all this violence, or the number of guns that are being legally imported into Canada, then what is it? And he nails what the problem actually is.
Yeah. Repeat violent offenders getting, thrown back out into the street due to our lax, legal system. I don't want to call it a justice system because there's no justice in it, but due to our legal system being thrown back out into the street to commit crimes, violent crimes, again and again and again. And people are dying because of it. He nails it.
Yeah, they are. And it's funny because we get it thrown, at us wherever we are. Like, why won't you listen to police? It's like, I'm listening very carefully to police. Why won't you listen to them? You're not listening to them because they disagree with you. So
that's right.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. So, time after time, over and over and over again, you see stuff like this that reinforces that the government is completely misguided on purpose because it's an ideological war for them. They literally won't lift a finger to stop the violence. And in fact, they actually created 2 bills, C-75 and C-5, to make it easier on those people so that they can recommit their crimes. And if you're not sure, just look up Liberal Bill C-75 that had to do with lessening some penalties, making indictable offenses into hybrid offenses so people can get off with a fine for things like kidnapping, terrorism-related charges, firearm charges, stuff like that. And then Bill C-5, which was a little bit more of the same. Anyway, look at the details yourself. But this is what the Liberals did, and this is the result of that. And at the same time, they're like, okay, well, Rod and Tracy, you can't own guns. Like, this is why we're out talking about this constantly. But anyway.
Yeah. I'd almost say that the Liberals, I'd go a little step further and almost say the Liberals use it sometimes to support their gun control agenda, right? For people who read articles like this Torstar article, oh, well, you reelect us and we'll ban some more guns. Yeah. And we just keep going around in this silly circle, and it's nuts.
Yeah. And again, they use these simple messages to fool people. Because they're like, well, if there's no, and who's a huge offender of this is Najma Ahmed. Well, the disease is guns, right? Gun violence, and the vector is guns. So if there's no guns, there's no gun violence. And it's like, well, yeah, if you have an IQ of about 60, that makes all the sense in the world. But the world's a little bit more complicated than that. So they keep simple messages for simple people. And then anyone that looks into it more than, for a couple of flashes at Twitter or some headlines, they're like, oh, okay, it's the guns that are in the possession of licensed gun owners don't seem to be a problem. Like, things have happened for sure. Things have happened with motor vehicles and gasoline and knives and everything. But how to solve this firearm-related violence problem is not to take away licensed gun owners' guns. It's to tackle repeat violent offenders and people associated with other criminal activity, because almost virtually all of the firearm-related violence comes from them. But that takes a lot longer to say than more guns equal more death.
Yeah, it's a weird debate. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think the messaging on that is very difficult because people like that, easy to digest, simple messaging. But this government's had 8 years to prove that their way of doing things was going to make Canadians safer. And we are all, we are all less safer for it. So I think that the tides are changing for sure. The pendulum's swinging big time. In fact, it's swinging so hard it's crashing through the wall. But I think things are going to change. But we've got lots on the horizon. We'll see when the House rises what the climate's like here in Ottawa. And I don't mean climate change. I mean political climate for gun owners. And, we'll keep an eye on things.
Absolutely. And we're not finished. We haven't even begun to fight. So
no,
don't worry. We're not going to make it easy for these people. Okay.
That's right.
Thanks for the update. And I guess we'll see you next time.
We'll see you then.
All right. That's going to do it for episode 149 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I've got a couple of housekeeping items. Don't forget, I got this crazy Poly tweet to show you too, and a couple of other things before I let you go. Now, interestingly enough, Tracy and I talked about Pierre Poilievre's speech and what he said about the bans and gun owners in the speech, but I never showed you the clip. So I want to just show you that clip right now so that at least you've seen it and heard exactly what he said for yourself. Check it out.
So my common sense plan is jail and not bail. Jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders. We'll reverse bans on hunters and licensed sport shooters, and we'll use that money to jail gangsters and bolster borders against illegal drugs and guns from the United States.
Well, there you have it. One thing that was kind of interesting about his speech and about everything that Poilievre's been saying for the last year or so, including what he said about guns, is this is an interesting thing I found in my own mind, is that he says things that a responsible, competent, reasonable adult would say if they were running a government. He says like common sense, regular things. No pun intended with their tagline, the common sense thing, right? But just says things like that you would expect a rational adult to say. And it's refreshing. And I was like, oh, this is so refreshing. It's almost like and that in itself, I was just like, how bad has it been that kind of behavior is refreshing, right? Anyway, just kind of a strange thing. I notice these things, like even in my mindset, sometimes I'm like, why do I think that that's such a departure from everyday business? Like that should be what is normal. And it's like, yeah, because we've been 8 years under this lunatic government and all of their lunacy, for good reason, right? Making its way through the mainstream media into our lives, into many aspects of our lives. But I think the reason why I'm bringing it up is, again, just like I said in the intro, there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. It's been a dark 8 years, getting progressively worse. But I think it's going to turn around. All right, next thing, housekeeping item, Field Officer of the Month. So Field Officer of the Month for August is our good friend, Ryan Hollyoak. So a couple things about Ryan. Ryan has been associated with the CCFR, I think, before I was associated with the CCFR. And so he's been here the whole time. And Ryan took on a volunteer task, which was to be the administrator of our closed Facebook group, which there even now is 62,000 people. And I think it's been as high as 70,000 before. And that is a thankless job. And I don't want to take the spotlight off of Ryan, but allow me to do that for just 1 second. He leads the team of admins because there's a lot of people that volunteer as administrators in there, and it is a thankless, horrible job. And I can't tell you, admins, how much I appreciate you being there day in and day out. And I don't talk about every individual volunteer because I have my own things to worry about, right? But I tell you, it's such a thankless job because you have people that run in there. You know what the internet is like, any kind of internet forum or platform that's similar to that. People run in there, they start flinging poop around, right? And then you have people yelling, why the heck is this guy in here? How come he's not banned? How come he's not muted? He needs to be disciplined because it's whatever's doing. Then they do that. And then you have a whole different group of people and the person themselves like, this is BS. You're just like the liberals, you're censors, where's my free speech? Just like, man, you cannot win. So Ryan has run that group for 8 years. So thank you, Ryan, so much for all of your help. And he's always been there for the CCFR. So definitely another very deserving field officer of the CCFR. And as you may already know, Ryan will get a $100 coupon code for the CCFR online store and a year's subscription free to Canadian access to firearms. So thank you, Donovan, our great friend over at CATF, for continuing to donate that to our field officers to show our appreciation. Really appreciate it. And of course, he gets mentioned on our television show on Wild TV, CCFR Radio on the Air, and here on the podcast. So thank you, Ryan. Okay, the crazy Poly tweet. I had a whole bunch of crazy tweets, actually, but there was so much other content. They don't take precedent over important content. They're just there when we have a little bit more airtime to fill. And you know what? Someday there won't be so much firearm-related content because everything will go back to normal, can you imagine? And then I'll start dragging out all the really old, crazy Poly tweets. And there's so many of them. I'm only going to show you one in the interest of time, but I've got them from the docs. Wow, that's an unhinged Twitter account. I think one drunken teenager, is running all these accounts because it's just like, it doesn't make, the stuff they post is really angry and it's mean, and a lot of times it just doesn't make any sense. It's almost like I'm going to throw poop at you, and I don't care if it doesn't make sense. You've got crap on you now. It's like, what? Anyway, check this tweet out. So it says here from our friends at Poilievre, Manitoba Gun Business. Apparently that's what they're called, like gun-businesses. Gun Business says that Bill C-21 could have severe impacts on people's livelihoods, but he doesn't explain how. Can you imagine a firearm business? There's a bill that's banning the inventory that they sell to their customers. And there was even a previous gun ban that banned another significant chunk of the inventory that they sell to gun owners. And Poly can't figure, they needed somebody to explain to them why that is going to affect their sales negatively. Like, is this a real tweet? It's just weird. But wait. It gets worse. Have a look. They continue by saying, you don't explain how. Is it by banning domestic abusers from owning guns? Or by requiring a license to buy magazines? Like, so let me get this straight. I'm not going to analyze this for 20 minutes, but let me get this straight. They didn't explain how banning everything that they sell will negatively impact sales and affect livelihoods of all the people that are employed by them. But obviously, you're implying, you're like, I need to throw something at them at the same time. You're implying that some portion of their business volume is represented by domestic abusers. Anyway, there's another crazy, could have been a drunk tweet, but there's Poly for you. All right. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Thanks so much for your support. If you want to support the CCFR by becoming a member, by donating, or becoming a member of the Insiders Group, you can go to firearmrights.ca. That's firearmrights.ca. Check all that out. Tell your friends about the podcast. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.